Good evening. Good evening. Well, afternoon. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone. We are at our next session for the day. That is work from anywhere, and that will be hosted by our esteemed team member, Michael Kerr. Very good afternoon to you all. So we decided to include this session in our presentation today because we are now experiencing a new normal. And for digital transformation to truly be successful, the notion that work is a location has to end. So we are now making the affirmation or confirmation that work is what you do, and technology should enable an agile workforce. So Michael Kerr, our CTO, will be sharing with you how you can really enable that. How can you enable your workforce to be productive wherever they are and ensure that they can deliver both for what the business needs and what your clients need as well. So I'm going to hand it over to our CTO, Michael Kerr, who is going to be host today. Please, as you have heard throughout the day, if you have a question, you can share it via chat, or you can indicate that you'd like to have be notified, and we'll take a question from you there. We will be having a brief session after to if you have any questions that you want to pose to Michael, that will be available. But until then, please, we're looking forward to an engaging session, and not too fear. Michael is ready for all the hard questions that you're going to be posing. He thrives on that, right, Michael?
Cheers, Ryan. Cheers.
All right, hand it over to you now. Take care.
All right. Thanks again, Ryan. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. So I am Michael Kerr, the CTO of Vertis Technology, and today the discussion is about remote working. And during this time, essentially, with more organizations working remote, how do we achieve remote working, but not only remote working, but how do we work remote securely? So again, thanks for joining. A brief overview of Vertis Technology. So we are approximately 50 plus IT professionals, including permanent staffing, contractors, with over 30 highly certified engineers, both locally and internationally. So some of our partners, this slide touches on some of our technology partners that we partner with. Some of them, those technologies are relevant to remote working technology, or comes into play within an infrastructure that needs to enable a remote working environment. So how do we thrive tomorrow, considering our situation that we're in and the need to remote work? So within this pyramid are some building blocks that we need within our IT infrastructure, or capabilities that we need in order to make sure that we achieve the capability of being able to work remotely seamlessly. So on top of that, proactive monitoring, backup and disaster recovery, a fully digital platform, and that in a sense will achieve us the capability of being able to work remotely. Considering the rains that we've had over the past couple of days, some of us may be looking at our disaster recovery plan, our backup strategy, and our monitoring capabilities, given that the limitation of travel compounded by COVID. So this session is primarily about the remote workplace. So remote working translates to the digital workplace, right? How do we move away from a desk within an office to basically working anywhere? And what does work from anywhere actually means? It means definitely what it is, work from anywhere. So this could be on the beach, in a cafe with internet access, at your home. It is no longer work from home, but work from anywhere. It could be working on a plane in transit. Gone are the days when internet capability was not available in flight on an airplane. Currently, you can work on cruise ships, you can work on a plane, on the beach with 4G technology, now 5G come into play. And this is really what work from anywhere means. And to achieve that, there are several technology capabilities that our environment or infrastructure architecture need to pose to allow us to achieve, to provide our staffing with that flexibility and our workforce essentially with that flexibility of working from wherever they are. So business continuity segue nicely into a digital workplace and basically work from anywhere. There may be a need, and there have been several discussions the start of the year when COVID kicked in, as to organizations that their IT infrastructure may be somewhat legacy or does not have the capability of providing for a seamless transition to remote working, which means that organizations needed to react fairly quickly. Some organizations needed to rethink or redefine their IT strategy, considering the fact that they will not be able to be close to their data centers anymore, as a number of organizations, small to medium organizations, some large ones as well, operate their data center within the same physical buildings and not a colo location, whereby they are next to the IT, they're next to the servers, they're next to the switches, etc. Which meant that now we have to rethink all that. The backup strategy now comes into play. The disaster recovery strategy now comes into play, which means that if I can't get to the physical building, where do I now store my backups to make sure that they are accessible when I am working from wherever I am? Or my disaster recovery plan, how do I recover from a technology standpoint to an IT infrastructure architecture that does not necessarily reside within the physical building or on premise, which means that now we need to start thinking about an end-to-end digital IT capability, which means that we need to think cloud first, essentially, and so in more times than one, transform. Some of us are halfway to the point whereby our IT is within that space whereby it is flexible to allow us to adopt rapidly, which means that we have to go through an entire transition to make sure that the technology itself is capable of allowing that sort of flexibility. IT infrastructures, legacy IT infrastructures means that we may need to remediate certain technologies that we've got in place, which to allow us to basically work remote. Some of those could be firewall capabilities whereby we weren't really concerned about client access VPN, or the firewall is there to provide perimeter protection. Now, with the need of working remotely or being able to provide our workforce with that flexibility to work from anywhere and also continue the productivity of the organization, means that we may need to re-architecture, we may need to remediate the perimeter of our IT. Some of organizations and some that we have dealt with directly meant that they had to basically adopt a totally new IT strategy. Their on-premise IT may not be fit for purpose, or in some cases that we have experienced, would not have been fit for purpose to achieve the capabilities to allow their workforce to go offsite and work, which means that they had to implement a cloud-first approach in regards to IT. End user computing is another area that we tend to overlook within our IT estate. PC was good. It was good last year. It was good the year before. And if you're in organizations that, okay, the computing power of the PC and also the robustness of the PC, it meant that providing our workforce with an endpoint device that they can now move about with and be mobile meant that we had to rethink our entire end user computing strategy. And as we see earlier in the year, there was a shortage of laptops, and currently there is still a shortage of laptops, with schools vying for laptops, businesses vying for laptops. Now, without us defining that upfront, that end user computing strategy with a mobile first approach, it means that we would have somewhat suffered with the shortage are having to procure rapidly mobile end user devices, laptops, tablets, etc. Security end-to-end, again, this is another thing that comes right into play with remote working and business continuity. Meant that our security, both from client side, server side, web protection, email filtering, web filtering, it was fine. Running a spam filter, a malware filter, a web proxy appliance internally within the data center. Within this time, that is no longer sufficient because now users are going out basically anywhere to work. We need to still extend the enterprise IT security stack out to the end users wherever they are, which means that we have to rethink that entire strategy end to end. Testing, that is key. I can't speak more on testing and the need to test our disaster recovery plan, which makes sure that in an event like this, we are safe. And from experience, we can see that several organizations possibly would not have done enough testing and basically caught in a sort of precarious position when the need arises for them to basically extend the work from anywhere capabilities. So through remote working and the various capabilities that we need to have in place, and some solutions that we'll need to make sure that our workforce can basically work from anywhere. Virtual desktops, virtual apps, or remote apps, VPN. Some of them I think we possibly would already be running some sort of VPN technology, but virtual desktops, not many organizations or not many applications in the sense allows for the implementation of virtual desktops in the past, which means that currently we have to possibly re-architecture or look at virtual desktop capabilities. We've got Citrix, VMware Horizon, Windows Virtual Desktop, which is brand new and is just in time for these capabilities. Online productivity tool, which allows for anywhere access. So whether it be Google Suite or Office 365, which provides you that capability to make sure that users can access their files no matter where they are, allowing that IT provide the relevant security wrap around it. Online collaboration tooling. So we're accustomed to having a PBX in the office with handsets on the desk, and not necessarily the use of soft phones or thinking about the use of soft phones to extend the user extensions away from outside of the organization. So to achieve fully remote access capabilities, it means that now we need to start thinking about how do we extend voice capability out to the users? How do we need to make sure that the users can collaborate, know that they're not sat next to each other in the same office location? And several tools that does allow that capability currently. Microsoft Teams, fantastic. We're on this using Microsoft Teams at the moment, which basically allows all the users to communicate in real time, just as if and collaborate on files, etc., as if they were literally sat next to each other. Rapidly scaling up and scaling down. So we know during this time, this crisis of COVID and remote working, various organizations of various sizes tend to scale, right? And some of them contract. However, implementing an IT strategy that basically allows to either flex in either way during a crisis like this. It could be a case whereby you're operating within a business critical space or a critical infrastructure space which affect life or whatever, which means that you may need to onboard contractors to basically augment your internal staffing capability, which means that the IT estate needs to be able to flex rapidly to basically facilitate those needs. Also, some business processes that may need walk-in users. Our current position, we can't really have the amount of walk-in users or have walk-in users any at all, which means that we may need to implement digital tooling, whether it be web applications to facilitate those business processes. So from the ground up, we need to think about a flexible IT capability to make sure that we can present our users, both internal and external, with those applications stacked through a flexible IT estate. And security, we can't talk about much more about security. zero trust infrastructure from the ground up, which means that we are protected end to end within our IT estate. Remote working securely. So several challenges around this. For government organizations, financial organizations, or organizations that need to meet certain compliance requirements. So there are organizations whereby you can't work within a certain country, you can't access the organization's data within a certain country, means that we need to geofence the access. That could be restricting access from various countries based on the threat level. It could mean that, okay, you're working from anywhere, essentially. How do we make sure that authentication to the systems or the remote systems aren't just by a username and password, which means that now we need to look at the implementation of multi-factor authentication, okay? And this is what security means. Where, a username and password may be good in the office, but when we are now working in a cafe or in a hotel, whereby there are people looking over your shoulder that not aligned or associated with the organization in at all, now we need to think of that second step or multiple other steps of how we provide a multi-level authentication capability. And this could mean via biometric, with username and password. It could mean a PIN code that gets sent to a mobile phone. It could be via a mobile app with a token. Also access to applications. So now we're in the organization and we're utilizing web-based applications. It was fine transmitting the data unencrypted, but now that we need to make these applications available externally, now we need to look at encrypting that communication from the end user to the application, which means that now we need to look at PKI infrastructures or certificates in short. Also public DNS, all that sort of thing. And also the networking end-to-end, making sure that we've got the relevant security parameters in place to basically secure our IT infrastructure networks. So some of the considerations to security, we touched on various earlier, but IT use policy. So before, a number of organizations wouldn't have even thought about working remotely, with the exception of managers to some extent. But now everyone needs to be working remotely, more or less, that can work remotely, which means that we need to revise our IT policy, right, security policy, to make sure that we capture that remote working procedures and processes within that policy. Now we're sending the users home with organization devices. Some users may have admin access. Some users may possibly give this device to their kids or family members to use at home, because we don't know what's happening. How do we make sure that that desired state security configuration is present, which means that the endpoint security tooling that we're putting on these devices, we need to make sure that they are locked down to the effect whereby the configuration cannot be compromised or changed. And even if there is a level of change, there's some sort of desired state management, which basically revert those changes. BYOD, organizations may not be able to purchase devices for every single user. And if I was to consider myself, I've been using my own device to work remotely for at least the past 5 years and more, which meant that now I have to consider, okay, my workforce is now using their own device. How do I build a security strategy around that to make sure that the device is secure, and also I can guarantee that my data, my infrastructure, my applications are not being compromised. Mobile device management, those are some of the toolings. We may need to now issue tablet devices, mobile phones, smart devices. How do we now control the applications? How do we now control the enterprise workspace on those applications? Which meant that now that we need to consider a mobile device management. So a solution that we can manage the devices remotely, we can remotely wipe the device, we can deploy applications to the device, we can distribute policies, security policies to those devices in a controlled way, whereby if those devices are stolen or get lost for whatever reason, we've got some level of control over the device. We touched on multi-factor authentication prior, but conditional access, and this is where we talk about what device can access our infrastructure remotely and where can they access the infrastructure from? So it could be a case whereby, okay, I'm only going to restrict access to my IT infrastructure from your home, which means that you have to provide me with your IP address or something of the sort. Or I'm only allowing you access to my IT infrastructure from Jamaica. So if you travel outside of Jamaica, you're restricted access only if you're connecting to my environment from a Jamaican IP address. And that is what conditional access is, and which includes other countries as well. We can restrict access to from different countries. I've been in positions whereby we're not able to allowed to access the IT infrastructure outside of Europe. So if you travel to Russia, if you travel to China, or any one of those states, Iran, that are somewhat colorful, you're not basically allowed to access the organization's IT infrastructure based on the criticality of the data and the overall sensitivity. Identity and access management. So how do we manage identity across the stack? And we can achieve this by several things. So organizations that we've come across recently, whereby it was fine running a work group estate within an organization and our files flowing. But now we need to introduce a solution or capability that allows my workforce to work remotely, which means that I need to have an identity capability in place to basically manage who is accessing what, or who can access my environment. And some of these Active Directory, Azure AD, or some of the identity and access management solutions that we can utilize to centralize identity control and role-based access through the environment, and making sure that a user is connecting from a trusted source, and the user is also a trusted user to my IT estate from their remote location. IT health check and pen testing. So 9 times out of 10, organizations doesn't know that they are compromised until they are compromised. With the advent of working remotely, and with much more users within an organization or workforce working remotely, now the exploit footprint for exploitation for an organization's IT estate has just multiplied massively, which means that now if we haven't been doing IT health check or penetration testing prior, now we need to look at how do we go about implementing an IT health check or penetration testing, or implement some sort of technology to make sure that we get the relevant alerting notifications of any exploits or anything untoward or critical that needs to be brought to the attention regarding security. What we've seen is user sensitization, users away from the desk, they're not close to IT support anymore. The technology that we'll implement is somewhat different. Whether it be, okay, a user is not accustomed to connecting to VPN, for instance, which is possibly the simplest form of connecting in, but they're not accustomed to connecting to a VPN. There are several toolings that we might implement. It could be Windows Virtual Desktop from Azure that we implement. No, the interface would have changed. The logon access would have changed. We may need to implement Citrix or Horizon or some other sort of remote working solution. Now we need to sensitize these users as to how to utilize these technologies to make sure that they're working safely and securely and our IT estate is not compromised. Some of the digital services that Vertis as an organization offers currently. So virtual desktop capability, which we can scale massively from your 5 users to your thousands of users. An entire digital IT service. So if you're an organization that currently doesn't have an IT estate that is capable, or legacy IT estate, or an IT estate that needs some sort of remediation or refresh, there's a full digital IT service that we do offer. A cloud backup capability as well, which meant that as part of a disaster recovery and backup plan, if you need to back up off-site, that's the solution that we've got, and also a full end-to-end digital IT infrastructure, which meant that your on-premise servers that are ailing and dying, and given the floods and the delay in shipping hardware, this is a solution that we can provide to basically remediate and provide you up-to-date, fit-for-purpose IT estate. And that's it. Any questions? Ryan, back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Michael. I wanted to know, I know questions may be coming in, but I'd just like to kick it off. In terms of enabling work from home, right? How would the organization go about in terms of training people? Would it need to involve any training for that to be done? How important is that as it relates to enabling the work from home workforce, or work from anywhere rather?
Sure. So this is based on the organization's current state, right? Mm-hmm. So it's also based on technology. It's not a one size fits all. Organizations may have various different types of technology or different solutions that they may utilize. It could be a laptop with a VPN concentrator that they connect. So it's basically sensitizing the users around connecting, also making them aware of their surrounding, because when they're in the office, they don't really care. It's a trusted environment. Now that they're working remotely, it's sensitizing those users to make sure they're aware of their surroundings, right? Given that they're accessing the organization's data from possibly a not that secure location.
Okay. And a second one, as it relates to, do you find that there's a particular technology that enables it? Would you say cloud environment enables agile workforce, or is it on-prem? Is it a hybrid approach? Which do you believe enables agile workforce more, or do any?
So that's a good question, Ryan. Budget has to be considered, right? But being a technology person, I don't like seeing hardware, to be honest. And so when we talk about even today, right, whereby IT themselves need to work remote, not only the general workforce. And if IT wants to work remote, IT doesn't want to be around physical servers, right? And they don't want a headache to be looking at drives if drives are failing, etc. So whether it be a co-location space or a public cloud offering, or a managed service offering on a cloud capability, that would be ideal. It's easy to flex. It's easy to scale, right? And it's on demand. So it means that IT could essentially work remotely, right? They still have access to servers. They still have access to applications. Well, the actual tin is actually is not in focus. Also, connectivity is in Jamaica now, right? So you got the two main providers, and you got other providers out there. So the connectivity is the main concern, right? But I think with the relevant redundancies built into the architecture, then it wouldn't be of concern at this time. But yeah, definitely a cloud solution or a virtualized environment. So I would say first priority, cloud, if the budget allows it, and second would be a virtualized environment.
So you touched on a topic as it relates to the ISP providers. That's a touchy or sore point for some customers. How would you go, and not to get too technical, but how would you go about allaying their fears about moving to the cloud? How would you go about doing that? What redundancies, and if you could share with us possibly a client that you have enabled, or we have enabled, in terms of leveraging that environment.
Yeah, sure, Ryan. So the concern before was connectivity, right? And it still is somewhat, and it's still valid. So an organization with multiple locations across Jamaica with a single, whether it be Metro or VPN linking all locations. Now, when you're remote, that really doesn't come into play, right? So redundancy from an ISP, it's multiple providers coming into the environment. So if you're building out an infrastructure whereby remote working or is considered, and connectivity is a key part, and not even remote working, but the utilization of several business tools at the moment. Office 365, which is a primary one, which is in the cloud, which means that to maintain that connectivity and the availability of the service, you need to have connectivity, right? Which means multiple providers. The better part is that when the workforce is remote, they've got their own connectivity, right? So they're users on 4G, they're users on Flow, they're users on digital. You just need to make sure that your data center, whether it be cloud, and cloud is fantastic because the cloud is not going to go offline, right? Whether if it's Microsoft or AWS, there are multiple gateways in, which meant that connectivity is not an issue. But from your central data center location, multiple providers, choosing the right perimeter device to allow for that multi. I wouldn't say, I'm going to say multi, not two, because before it was redundancy meant two, right? But you need to choose the device and think about basically all the connectivity capabilities that are available. Multiple WAN ports. Does it allow 4G? Considering 5G is now in the space, should I even be thinking about implementation of 5G or 5G as a connectivity means onto know my perimeter device?
Yet we had COVID in March, right? And other organizations had to really respond in a quick manner, right? How, if our company was to come and say, hey, we wanted to really enable this remote workforce, what time period, how long would that take? Is there a time period that you can give to enable a workforce? Is it or the environment, or is it will it be ongoing? Speak on that in terms of the timeline to really get this going.
Yeah, so regarding timeline, if I was to take Vertis as an organization, when COVID happened, basically operations HR said, go home, don't come back, right? Because we were ready from day dot. We built our IT infrastructure with a cloud first approach, and endpoint devices were built on laptops only, which meant that you just turn up because there is a physical location. So to answer your question, Ryan, how long does it take? It depends. If your on-premise IT infrastructure is in need of remediation, the time for remediation needs to be considered, and that if procurement of hardware needs to be considered, given the shipping time now, we're talking about lead time for hardware is what, 6 to 8 weeks, and could be more in some cases. If you're a cloud, it meant that all we need to do, and if your infrastructure as a code, which is what we practice, it purely means that us changing a few variables and press a button and wait, right? And it will go ahead and spin out or scale up the IT estate. So it is a chicken and egg situation, right? It isn't a single time for that you can say for all organizations, but for us and our experience, we have brought an entire organization up and working remotely in COVID within a matter of days. So 72 hours turnaround time for several organizations, and organizations that lifted their entire IT estate to our digital infrastructure offering. That took 2 weeks.
All right,
and it was down about the bandwidth that was available to upload the data. But yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to throw it back to the group. I don't want to take too much of their time. Let me see, I've not seen any questions coming in. Let me just go through. But please, folks, if you have any questions, you can definitely let us know. You can place your questions in the chat, or if you'd like to be notified here, you can do so as well. Michael, I don't know if you're seeing this question here, but I'll share with you. It's concerning BYOD, right? I guess this is dependent on company policy. If it is to apply, what areas in terms of security would you recommend the company condition? And what are the pros and cons for that kind of service? BYOD, bring your own device. Thanks for that question, Garfield.
Thanks for the question again, Garfield. Right, so BYOD, I've been using BYOD for the last possibly 10 years, I reckon. And it is purely based on the organization. And I've used my BYOD within government, travel, many organizations that operate critical national infrastructure and financial organizations. But it's purely based on the requirements that you need to meet. So firstly, define what hardware is acceptable, right? Because the hardware comes, when I say hardware, you may have applications that need to run on certain hardware, which means that you need that needs to be defined. What does acceptable looks like from an end user computing device, and that includes operating system, also patch levels, antivirus capability, and also separation of the personal workspace and the workspace that will be utilized for work. In my case, it's a case whereby there are multiple users accounts, a space dedicated to work and a space for personal. The policy will need to be redefined. Licensing needs to be taken into consideration. If you're now shifting licenses to devices that are not owned by the organization, that needs to be considered. However, if you're an organization that operates a virtual desktop or virtual application infrastructure, now really there isn't really much consideration. Once the device is capable of connecting into that environment, because 9 times out of 10, the enterprise virtual desktop solutions that are out there are basically sandboxed, and there are policies from your IT that can be sent down to those devices to make sure that you can't transfer files, etc., from that device to your IT estate, which means that the requirement from a policy perspective becomes less.
Okay, thanks for that, Michael. I have another question here from Anton. Do you have thoughts that you can share about your experience with the softer aspect of working remotely? The tools do a great job of keeping us connected, but it doesn't really fully address some of the issues teams face when it comes to culture. How do you really enable a culture of remote work? How would you go about it, and how did Vertis and how has Vertis enabled remote work culture?
Ryan, I don't know if you want to take the culture part.
All right, so thanks for that, Anton. So really great question, and thanks for asking it. As we had said earlier, it's really how do you enable that workforce? And you mentioned we do have the tools here, Michael shared with you, but it's really having an agreement and understanding with your team members that yes, the location is no longer fixed, but deliverables, right? And it's not about micromanaging. It's not about having that kind of over the shoulder and, for lack of a better term, bucker master mentality. But what it is really having an agreement. It's not only to say we're going to work as a team to achieve a specific goal, but we have certain objectives and agreed tactics to put that in place. The tools come after, right? We at Vertis really believe in terms of people, process, and technology. So even with our clients, the training aspect of it is very key. So yes, the technology, as Michael shared, we can get it up and running in under 72 hours. We can give it a tool in under 72 hours. But really what has made the success of our customers is that we train them the process. So the client has identified that they want to make this happen. We sit with them, we train the trainers. We say, listen, here's what you need to do. We train them in the tools, how you hold each other accountable, what the goals are, because what you don't want is the experience to change if you have your team members working from home, from a cafe, from someone's home. It's really that experience. So the training part of it is very, very important. Now, COVID may have asked us to speed that up in terms of being able to respond quickly, but even then, that process needs to be continued. So HR has a very important part to play. Some organizations we interacted have change departments, organizational behavior departments. So what we did, we worked with them closely to see this change is coming in terms of technology. How can you prepare for it? How you can benefit from it? And how you can allow your teams to be really successful and enable their best.
So if I might add to that, Ryan, this is where the collaboration tools come into play. Whereby, so most of the concern is my workforce actually working, right? So that has been the biggest concern I've seen, and I think for us we have mitigated that. The tooling that we offer allows for presence capability, right? Even though there are other tools that you can use to counteract presence, but it's the overall people side. Keep in touch with the team. So not because you're not close to them doesn't mean you're going to ignore them, right? Constant contact, and that could be through the collaboration tooling. Teams, for instance, it could be through chat. So Teams might be showing green that the employee or the user is next to the IT, but how do you make sure that the user is actually there? And it's also a sense of trust as well, right? And also setting the groundwork from day dot in the policy. Policies defining that the users need to respond within a certain time and need to be around their IT. And it is more or less driven by the type of work that the workforce does. Different organizations may have different policies, and they may carry out different tasks, which may be handled differently.
All right, thanks for that, Michael. Milton shared a question as well. For a BOD strategy to be implemented and be successful, should the organization look at defining a governance policy in keeping with industry best practices to manage the expectations of users and the organization? You got that, Michael?
Yes. Cheers, Milton, for that. Yeah, definitely. So policies needs to be in place, right, to govern the use of personal devices. What you don't want, there needs to be guidelines set, which mean that, and there are industry policies guidelines out there that provide a baseline. However, based on it goes back to the organization, right, and also the information that the organization hold or the users has got access to or will be accessing from those devices. So definitely a governance policy or your IT or your remote working policy, in our case, provides the governance framework for BYOD.
Another one here, Michael. My experience with work from home so far has been maintaining one-on-one with team members. Well, I think that's more a statement. Daily stand up with your team, virtual events, and flex session to have open conversations. Yes, definitely that is key. That is how you continue the culture as you were working at the office. So definitely that's key. You have to have those tools in place, those exercises in place as well to continue that success of engagement. Thanks for that, Anonymous. All right, not seeing any further questions.
One round from Anonymous.
Okay.
Are there any risk involved with working from home, not having strong endpoint security? Yes, with everything there is risk. So endpoint protection at the forefront. So those are one of the primary building blocks. Worst if the device is a BYOD. If it's an organization managed device, then the organization would have accepted that their device is whatever is on it. But yes, the endpoint security solution that is deployed to those devices needs to be up to date. They need to be aware whereby if those devices will not be connecting back to the environment to pull policies, is it a solution that you can remotely deploy policies to that endpoint or that device over the internet? So it could be a case whereby like the solution is not a VPN back to the enterprise IT, but they're accessing solutions, whether it be over a published application or published desktop, that sort of thing, or just web-based applications. But the policy server is sitting locally. Now, upon choosing that endpoint protection solution, what needs to be considered is that you can remotely deploy policies, possibly over the internet without the need to connect to VPN.
Right, well, I'm not seeing any further questions, Michael. I want to thank our attendees for joining us today for this session. We do have, we'll be open, keeping the session open for another 10 minutes. If there's any other questions that will come during that time, feel free to share. Until then, we look forward for you joining our next session, which will be at 4. And if you are interested in enabling your workforce to be agile and really not be limited to a set location, please reach out to us. Our sales team will be glad to assist you with getting this started. And we do look forward to partnering with you to really continue what the new normal is. Recently, I saw a study where between 50 to 60% of organizations will be having some either hybrid work from home policy or a full work from home policy going forward. So your people, process, and technology need to enable that for the future. All right, thank you so much. This session will remain open for another 10 minutes. Michael and I will be here. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask or share in the chat. All right.
So Ryan, one additional thing I want to add. So I've had the experience whereby working remotely and since COVID, delivering an IT estate for a central government organization here in the UK. And last 2 weeks, they realized that they don't need the office space anymore. And I remember before going off remotely, everyone was afraid, like, okay, all the resources that has not worked remote before was somewhat concerned about, okay, how productive are we going to be being remote? However, now the organization is realizing that actually we don't need the space, and this is round about possibly a 10,000 square foot office space, right? That they realize that we no longer need it because we're still achieving even more being remote. So that time that it takes to commute to the office, no more commuting. And also, the workforce is actually getting more done because they also are working later. When you're working from home or within your own space, you tend to work later without even knowing. So that is more or less a benefit of saving on the real estate cost and also basically getting more out of the day. So there's another question, Ryan, from I think Dale Kurt. How reliable is a VPN working? Is a remote working cloud as opposed to a VPN connection back to an on-premise location? So how reliable? It is as good as how you build it, essentially, right? So I personally don't think that you can build an on-premise data center to be as reliable as a public cloud, purely because of the amount of redundancies that are built into a public cloud environment. Where connectivity issues may occur is around latency from the end user provider going in. But what we have seen is that 9 times out of 10, the connectivity issue or the experience is down to that particular user experiencing a certain level of connectivity issue, but it doesn't affect everyone. Also, with virtual desktop technologies that require very little bandwidth for screen refreshes and mouse click, then it doesn't matter how bad your connectivity is. Once latency is within an acceptable um, time frame, then the user experience is maintained. But regarding availability and VPN, if you're scaling to the thousands of users, no, you need a very big VPN concentrated device. The cloud basically will provide that capability out of the box, whereas and direct access and all sort of thing. So there are a number of different technologies out there that you can achieve reliable remote working connectivity solutions with.
Hi, Michael. See another one from Allison here. Do you think that sufficient focus is placed on logging and monitoring attempts to authenticate remotely? I know many places rely on their firewall as a primary control in this area and only check if an alert is sent. Thanks, Allison, for that.
Yeah, Ryan. So with most organizations, security is somewhat an afterthought, right? In most cases, unless again you're driven by compliance whereby you need to have it, and some of this is driven by budget. But designing a fit-for-purpose IT infrastructure, logging, monitoring should be one of those what we call it foundation service that needs to be put in place, and not just putting the technology in place, but also the notification and the alerting in place. And these are based on configuration policies that will be defined within that system. So if for instance you're getting several login attempts or a sort of attack, then you're alerted, or something that is outside of the normal. Normally a system will go into a learning phase and start trending, and then anything outside of that trend will alert you. So it's basically building in that capability from the ground up and make sure that you're alerted. And even if you're not alerted, that a dashboard is present, a human readable dashboard is present to provide you with that intelligence. So again, where BYOD device desktop is used to connect to the office from home in work from home, is there a solution that can check the desktop if the antivirus is installed? With versions of Windows, yes, and that is what I touched on earlier in the slide, which is desired state configuration. So there are several VPN clients or endpoint protection clients or agents, whether it be endpoint device management agents such as SCCM, etc. If you're running System Center, if you're running a Cisco concentrator or Fortinet, it will basically check the device to make sure that before I connect to the enterprise estate, my patch level is at this. I'm running this operating system, and if not, it'll basically either isolate that device or force an update. So most of the enterprise grade devices has got that capability whereby the policies can be configured. If you're using like a NAC solution within your environment, those policies can also be defined to make sure that the BYOD or whatever end user device that is connecting in meet that baseline requirement before it allows connection. So, Ryan, I think we got another question here from Stephen. Which one would you prefer? Users use their own laptops and access virtual desktops, or use company-issued laptops with a company application installed, but data in the cloud? So it is not really a case of preference, Stephen. It's based on use case. So we could look at budget. Does the organization have the budget to procure laptops for all users? That can be in consideration. Also, data in the cloud, applications installed locally. Some applications and line of business applications are somewhat legacy, does not play well with the data residing some distance away from the end user device. So it is based on use case. There are some instances whereby the application needs to be next to the data for the application to function. And that would basically drive a solution, whether it be a published application or a published desktop for that sort of setup, whereby you're not running any legacy applications that play nicely with the data being some distance away. Then a laptop connecting via VPN to the IT is sufficient. But whereby the application needs the data next to it, then a remote app or remote desktop solution needs to be considered.
All right, well, thank you, Michael, for that presentation. Was informative and engaging. Thank you so much, sir. And attendees, thank you so much again for participating in this session on how to enable an agile workforce. As I said earlier, we are here at Vertis to partner with you to really get this workforce going and really allow for your workforce to really contribute and continue to contribute to your business success. We are available. Please reach out to us. The contact information is there, and we'll be glad to have a meeting with you at your convenience. Thank you so much again for attending. We'll be having our last session at 4 p.m. So we'd invite you to join us at that time, but really appreciate you joining us for this session. You stay safe and be well. Michael, take care.
Yep. Cheers, Ryan. Thanks again all for joining, and see you next time.